On November 4th, 1956, Soviet tanks rolled into Budapest to crush a spontaneous uprising of the Hungarian people, which a week previously had overthrown the Soviet-backed regime, a regime which had occupied the country since the end of World War II. Thousands of Hungarians were killed, and news of the invasion shocked the world. But besides forever changing the course of history in Hungary and Eastern Europe, the Soviet response also set off a chain of events which, unexpectedly and largely unnoticed, provoked a constitutional crisis in a country hundreds of miles away, which few people ever pay attention to. This crisis led to the overthrow of an elected parliament, the arming of two rival citizen militias, and the intervention of the American government. That country, San Marino, is a tiny mountainous enclave inside Italy, mostly known as a day-trip location for tourists from the Adriatic coast and stamps. But that 1957 coup, or double coup depending on how you view it, still reverberates today in San Marinese politics. Even a few people outside San Marino are aware it ever happened. Hi, I'm Fredo Rockwell, and welcome to another edition of Strange Politics. In this video, we will be exploring the little-known Rovereta Affair, which in 1957 led to the end of San Marino's duly elected government. San Marino's duly elected communist government, I should add. But first, a quick primer about San Marino itself. San Marino is a very small country, just 61 square miles, with a very large mountain, Mount Titano, which famously has 3 citadel peaks, which are represented on the San Marinese flag. It is said to have been founded in the year 301 AD by a man now known as Saint Marino, hence the name, and has survived as an independent country for over 1,700 years thanks to some very skillful diplomacy and a fair amount of luck. San Marino's current system of government dates back to the 1200s or so, and consists of a single-chamber legislature with 60 seats, known as the Great and General Council. Twice a year, the council elects 2 of its members to be captains regent, who are together referred to as the Regency. Despite being 2 people, the Regency is considered to be San Marino's head of state, and is one of only a very few 2-person heads of state in the world. Captains Regent serve 6-month terms, which begin and end on April 1st and October 1st each year. Remember these dates, they are important. Like many heads of state around the world, the Regency also sets the date for parliamentary elections. That's an important fact to remember too. As I mentioned, San Marino is very, very small and is also entirely surrounded by Italy, not far from the northern city of Rimini. Being small and totally surrounded by Italy means that while San Marino is a sovereign, independent country, it is pretty easy for Italy to boss it around. For example, over the decades, Italy has pressured San Marino into signing a series of bilateral treaties in which San Marino agrees to give up rights which most sovereign nations retain, such as having its own currency, or the right to have its own system for selling tobacco and alcohol. With regard to this, Italy's fear is that San Marino might permit the sale of alcohol and tobacco for lower prices than can be had in Italy, which would then encourage Italians to cross the border to buy truckloads of grappa and Marlboros, thereby causing much social harm, maybe, and more importantly, drastically reducing the money the Italian state makes from alcohol and tobacco sales. A similar situation arose when the San Marino government decided to license a casino in 1950, the Kursaal. The San Marinese government hoped the casino would be a major tourist draw and revenue source for the country, especially because, at the time, the Italian government had been forcing the closure of casinos in Rimini and other towns near San Marino. Having a new casino pop up in an area they couldn't control really cheesed off the Italian government, and within a year, San Marino was pressured into shutting the Kursaal casino down. As you might expect, San Marino's culture and traditions are also heavily influenced by Italy, and this goes for politics as much as anything else. When Italy was ruled by Mussolini's National Fascist Party from 1922 to 1943, the San Marinese Fascist Party ruled San Marino for more or less the exact same time period. After World War II, Italian politics was dominated by 2 parties, a center-right party called Christian Democracy and the far-left Italian Communist Party. For decades, Christian democracy managed to keep the communists from ever gaining power in Italy, but it was sometimes a close-run thing. The Italian communists were by far the largest communist party in Western Europe, and they were seen as a huge security threat by Italy's most important ally, the United States. Meanwhile, in San Marino, the Christian Democrats and Communists were also the 2 largest parties. but their positions were reversed. At the 1945 election, a coalition of San Marino's communist and socialist parties won 40 of a possible 60 seats on the Grand and General Council, creating the world's first democratically elected communist government. With the remaining 20 seats, the San Marinese Christian Democrat-led coalition came in a distant second place. You might think, well, it's only San Marino. It's small and cute and hardly anyone knows it exists. Who cares if it's run by communists? Well, actually, a lot of people had reasons to care. Yes, San Marino is small, but it is located inside one of the most important countries in Europe. What if San Marino set up a state broadcaster, which pumped out pro-communist messages from a radio or television station right in the heart of Italy? This was seen as enough of a threat for the Italian government to force San Marino to enter another bilateral agreement in 1953, in which San Marino gave up the right to have any broadcast media at all. This right was not returned to the San Marinese government until 1987. You might also wonder if the San Marinese Communist Party was really that communist. After all, San Marino is much better known for its colorful stamps rather than its industrial proletariat. Well, let me tell you, the Partito Comunisto Sammarinese, or PCS, was the real deal. It was led by Ermenegildo Gasparoni, who during the 1920s and 30s worked and traveled across Europe, and was active in the French Communist Party, the Communist Party of Luxembourg, and served as a volunteer in the International Brigades during the Spanish Civil War, so he was pretty hardcore. The program of the PCS appears to have also been pretty serious. I wasn't able to get any detailed descriptions of their legislative accomplishments, but one Italian language source I found said that the new government doubled the salaries of civil servants, legalized civil marriages, as in marriages not performed by a priest or in a church, and this really freaked out the Catholic Church in Italy, and at least attempted to provide free healthcare and implement a land redistribution scheme. The PCS was decidedly not progressive in one key way, however. As late as the 1950s, women in San Marino still did not have the right to vote. The opposition Christian Democrats favored extending the franchise to women, but the communists did not. Presumably, they must have thought that women were less likely to vote for them. The PCS was also active in the global communist movement, and since the global communist movement was relatively united at the time, this was before the split between Khrushchev and Mao, this meant the PCS naturally saw the Communist Party of the Soviet Union as a key ally. Put it all together, the attempt to set up a casino, the undermining of church authority, and fears of communist propaganda, and San Marino's communist-led government was enough to give lots of powerful people in Italy and America nightmares. But despite having a lot of powerful enemies, the San Marinese communists and socialists still managed to get re-elected in 1949, this time with 35 seats. Not quite as big a margin as before, but still good enough. And then the two parties won again at the next general election in 1951, but this time with only 31 seats, just barely enough to retain power. For the 1955 election, the US government intervened for the first time, or at least for the first time that I could find a record for. San Marino might be a tiny country, but by the 1950s, there were a few scattered communities of San Marinese immigrants in America, including a social club called the San Marinese Brotherhood, located in Queens, and another called the San Marino Club in Detroit. To try and help the pro-Western Christian Democrats, the U.S. government paid the airfare for hundreds of San Marinese men to fly to San Marino in time for the 1955 election. Remember, only men could vote. The Italian Christian Democrats also intervened, drafting Amintore Fanfani, a popular former Italian prime minister, to campaign for the San Marinese Christian Democrats. These interventions did not work. Together, the communists and socialists increased their total to 35 seats, a comfortable majority. And by the way, the hundreds of San Marinese men who had been flown in from America were only given one-way tickets, and were left stranded in San Marino. It took months for most of them to get home. But then, a year later, the Soviet invasion of Hungary shocked the world. Suddenly, the San Marinese Socialist Party started feeling very uneasy about their alliance with the San Marinese Communist Party, who were still very chummy with the Soviets. The Socialists called on the Communists to denounce the Soviet invasion, but they refused. For some moderate socialist members of the Grand and General Council, this was simply unacceptable. Perhaps sensing an opportunity, the American government intervened again. In March 1957, 3 months after the Hungarian uprising was crushed, a diplomat from the U.S. Embassy in Rome traveled to San Marino to meet with opposition leaders and with some of the less than happy Socialist Party members of the government. According to the diary of one unhappy socialist, Alvaro Casali, the American government wanted to explore the possibility of a new, non-communist San Marinese government taking power. And, by total coincidence, of course, 1 month later, on the 14th of April 1957, Casale and 4 other socialist members formally left the governing coalition, although one source I found said that they were expelled, and founded a new party, the Independent Socialist Party of San Marino. These defections left the government with just 30 seats, exactly half of the 60 seats in the Grand and General Council. This wasn't quite enough to topple the communists. They were still clinging on, but it was a major blow. The government tried pressuring the defecting socialist council members to resign, and they had leverage. Just after the 1955 election, the Communist-Socialist Coalition asked each of its newly elected members to sign undated letters of resignation. These were intended to enforce party discipline. Step too far out of line, and the government could submit your resignation letter to the Regency and force you off the council. The government did not actually go so far as to submit the resignation letters, however. They simply called on the defecting council members to step down. The defectors refused, and in an attempt to neutralize the government's leverage over them, they formally renounced the unsubmitted resignation letters to the Regency. The Regency appeared at least to tacitly accept that the letters were no longer valid. In June, the San Marinese foreign minister made an attempt to patch things up with the American government. He traveled to Florence for an informal visit at the U.S. consulate, hoping to persuade the Americans to have better relations with San Marino's communist-led government. But, as we shall see, this was unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the Americans kept up their contact with non-communist opposition politicians. In July, Federico Bigi, a portly school teacher who was also the leader of the San Marinese Christian Democrats, traveled to America at the invitation of the U.S. government, where he remained for an entire month. What Bigi discussed on that trip, and with who, is not 100% clear, but within a few weeks of his return to San Marino, everything ramped up a gear. Several gears. The term of the current regency was set to expire on October 1st, and so, as per custom and legislation, the Grand and General Council was due to convene on September 19th to elect 2 new captains regent. But the day before this election, September 18th, the opposition implemented their plan to seize control. A member of the governing coalition named Attilio Giannini announced his intention to leave the government and join the Christian Democrat-led opposition. According to several sources I found, Giannini was given, in exchange for switching sides, a job, a house, and 2 shotguns. But anyway, with this 31st council member, the Christian Democrats finally had a majority on the council and planned to form their own government and elect their own captains regent the next day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the council next convened. But at 11 o'clock the next morning, 4 hours before that meeting was scheduled, the leaders of the Communist-Socialist Coalition asked for an audience with the current captains regent. At that meeting, they presented letters of resignation from 34 members of the council, including letters from 5 of the socialists who had left the government and from both of the sitting captains regent, all dated with that day's date, September 19th. These were the very same previously undated resignation letters which the government had been holding since the last election, and which the captains regent had appeared to agree to disregard just a few months earlier. But this time, for whatever reason, all 34 resignation letters were accepted by the Regency as valid. By law, 30 councillors must be present for the Grand and General Council to convene, so following the resignation of 34 members, the council was rendered inquirate, a fancy term which means constitutionally unable to do anything at all. The Regency then did 3 things which, in the eyes of many, amounted to a coup. They placed a poster on the door of the Palazzo Pubblico, the main government building in San Marino, and where the Grand and General Council meet, stating that the council must now be considered to be dissolved. The Regency also officially called for new elections to the council to take place in 6 weeks, on November 3rd. Lastly, they sent instructions to the head of San Marino's Gendarmerie, or National Police, Captain Ettore Sozzi, to surround the Palazzo Pubblico and refuse to let anyone inside the building, except the captains regent or leaders from the government. I mean, if you're going to try and avoid look like you're overthrowing a government, having the police surround the Capitol building is a bad look. Also, according to a contemporary article published in America's Life magazine, an article which I did not find totally reliable, by the way, there were scuffles outside the palazzo after the poster was put up, and some local bystanders shouted "traitor" at a policeman, possibly Captain Sozzi, when he arrived at the palazzo. When the 31 councillors who had been expecting to form a new government arrived for their afternoon session, they were caught off guard. Initially, they returned home without incident, and for a brief moment it appeared that the move to dissolve the council had worked. But the situation was far from resolved. San Marino was quickly heading into a very messy constitutional crisis. Because the Grand and General Council had been dissolved before the new Captain's Regent could be elected, and because the terms of the existing Captain's Regent would automatically end in a few days on the 1st of October, San Marino would soon lack a head of state. The terms of the Captain's Regent could have been extended beyond October 1st, but only by order of the Council, and there was no more Council to take this action. Elections for a new Council were scheduled for early November, but only the Regency could convene the new Council into session after the election, and there was soon to be no more Regency. Basically, things were a complete mess. For the next 11 days, the different political parties which made up the Grand and General Council turned for support to their counterparts in Italy, but it was Federico Bigi, the leader of the San Marinese Christian Democrats, who came up trumps. He secured the support of Italy's Christian Democracy Party, which was led by Oddone Zoli, who was also, of course, Italy's prime minister. This meant Bigi and the other 30 council members who had been prevented from forming a new government now had the support of the Italian state. On the 28th of September, as part of this support, the Italian police set up checkpoints on roads leading into San Marino and refused to let anyone pass, anyone except journalists, plus a few select people who could help the cause of the Christian Democrats. This prevented the Italian communists from providing any assistance to the San Marinese communists, and also kept tourists out of San Marino. As it is today, tourism was a vital source of revenue for the small country, so this was a fairly serious blow to the San Marinese economy. Then, on the evening of the 30th of September, a few hours before the terms of the current regency was set to expire, the 31 council members who had been denied the chance to form a government a few days earlier gathered at a pub in nearby Rimini, just across the border in Italy. They then traveled as a group back into San Marino to an abandoned factory in the village of Rovereta. The building had no electricity, so everyone had to bring candles. At a stroke past midnight, the 31 members of the Grand and General Council raised a San Marinese flag on the factory roof and declared themselves to be the new provisional government of San Marino. Holding such a meeting in an abandoned factory might sound odd, but the decision to base the new provisional government in Rovereta was for a very good reason. Rovereta is located in the extreme northeast of San Marino, in an area which is surrounded by Italy on 3 sides. As soon as the provisional government was declared, armed Italian police took up positions which, although still inside Italian territory, provided substantial protection to the new provisional government. Were the Christian Democrats now mounting a coup? It certainly seemed so to the original communist government, and, as mentioned before, being surrounded by armed police is not a good look if you don't want to appear like you are mounting a coup. As news of the new provisional government spread, supporters of the old communist socialist-led government filled the Palazzo Pubblico. The communists then called for the establishment of an armed volunteer militia, and more or less immediately, about 150 men with an odd assortment of rifles began roaming the country. The provisional government also armed its supporters and also immediately sent a decree to the head of the gendarmerie, Captain Sozzi, saying that he had to put himself in the service of the legitimate authorities, which, according to the provisional government, was them, of course. Captain Sozzi met with the provisional government, but did not move his base of operations to Rovereta. Somehow he managed to maintain a position of authority during the crisis and kept the peace, despite the presence of 2 rival armed factions. No serious violence ever erupted, and no one was killed. This may have been partly because of San Marino's small size. When asked to explain the lack of bloodshed in the Life magazine article, one member of the provisional government reportedly said, "We are all related to one another." Diplomatically, the provisional government soon gained the upper hand. As soon as it had announced itself on October 1st, the Italian government had recognized the provisional government to be the lawful authority in San Marino. Then 2 days later, on the afternoon of the 3rd of October, the provisional government received more international support. A huge black Chevrolet pulled up outside the Rovereta factory. It contained the consul and vice-consul from the U.S. consulate in Florence. These guys said they had come to, and get this, officially invite San Marino to attend the upcoming meeting of the International Atomic Energy Agency. You might be wondering why the consul and vice-consul would both make a 6-hour round trip to personally deliver this routine-sounding message instead of simply sending a letter, and initially the members of the San Marinese provisional government were also confused by this. But the consul explained. He had been instructed to communicate the invitation to the legitimate authorities in San Marino. This was, in effect, a backdoor recognition of the new provisional government by the United States. And it was later learned that the Americans had mistakenly posted a written invitation to the conference to the old government at the Palazzo Pubblico. the government which the Americans definitely did not want to show any support for. So the consul and vice-consul hopped into a car and drove in a tearing hurry to make a personal visit to Rovereta, ensuring that the right government in San Marino knew it had American support. More international support came from a group of Hungarian refugees who had fled to Italy. Presumably appreciative that their plight had kicked off the entire debacle, the refugees sent a delegation to the Rovereta factory to wish the provisional government well and present them with a Hungarian freedom flag, which I think is this one, which was used during the uprising. It's the pre-1956 flag with the communist symbol in the middle cut out, which is pretty cool. 2 days later, on the 5th of October, things got more serious when an Italian armored car unit showed up at the border and set up camp, presumably ready to intervene with force if needed. After seeing their country blockaded by Italian troops, seeing their economy being denied vital tourist revenue, and getting the diplomatic cold shoulder from everyone that really mattered, the old government based in the Palazzo Pubblico was quickly running out of options. They did send a cablegram to the United Nations, requesting an international police force to come at once and, quote, ensure the safety of our people and protect our age-old freedom. I couldn't find any record of the UN replying. They did receive moral support from Radio Moscow, who denounced the provisional government as a, quote, band of adventurers, and described the actions of Italy as, quote, crude interference. And in several Italian-language articles I found, there are references to Ho Chi Minh, the famous Vietnamese revolutionary, expressing support for the San Marinese communists. But I couldn't find many details about this, and what I did find had a few anachronisms, so I'm not sure it really happened. But it's nice to think so. But a radio message and a possible name check from Ho Chi Minh were not enough to help the communists overcome the much more substantial support being received by the provisional government. On October 10th, Captain Sozzi requisitioned the Kursaal, the casino which the Italian government had forced the closure of a few years earlier, and used it as a base for a newly reconstituted San Marinese gendarmerie. Both governments, the provisional government and the communists, issued a joint statement authorizing Sozzi and his new policemen to maintain public order and urge the people of San Marino to keep calm. Then, the next day, the communist government issued a statement disbanding its militia and saying that, for the good of the country, it would let the provisional government assume power. 3 days after that, on October 14th, the 31 members of the provisional government made a long procession from the factory in Rovereta up Mount Titano to the Palazzo Pubblico, carrying an enormous San Marinese flag as they went. And then, according to several accounts I read, everyone lived happily ever after. But other accounts of the Rovereta affair I have found have a very different ending. The new Christian Democratic government claimed to have found evidence of substantial financial irregularities once they gained access to documents inside the Palazzo Pubblico. Whether or not this is true, the new government soon moved to hobble the country's former leaders. 2 years after the Rovereta affair, in 1959, 27 of the communist and socialist leaders were put on trial and found guilty of an attempted coup d'etat. They were sentenced to a combined 238 years in prison and were stripped of their civil and political rights. Following public protests, their prison sentences were suspended, but not the other penalties. Many members of the former government were forced into unemployment, and former Captain Regent Pippo Maggiani went into self-exile in Belgium, where he worked in a coal mine. The events of 1957 divided the population of San Marino in two, and although the lack of bloodshed is to be celebrated, the Rovereta affair nevertheless scarred San Marinese society and politics for decades. The Christian Democrats quickly passed a law allowing women to vote for the first time, which is fantastic, of course, and may have been decisive in helping them hang on to power for the next 20 years. The San Marinese Communist Party eventually returned to government following the 1978 general election, again forming a coalition with the Socialist Party. It remained in power until 1993, but in the meantime, following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the party renounced communism and reformed as the San Marinese Democratic Progressive Party. This party later merged with two other small parties to form the Democratic Party, before merging with the Socialists to form the Party of Socialists and Democrats. At the 2019 general election, this new party won just 4 seats, a far cry from the 40 seats it won in 1945. San Marino and its unusual political structure are pretty popular topics on YouTube. There are dozens, maybe hundreds of videos out there, mostly focusing on how small, quirky, and unusual San Marino is. But while small, San Marino is still home to 34,000 people, and that's a lot of people. Not a lot for an entire country, but enough to be treated as more than just a trivia question. So the next time you hear that San Marino is the fifth smallest country in the world's oldest democracy, or has a dual head of state, or any of the other standard facts one hears, spare a thought for the San Marinese generation of 1957, who, for a brief moment, were the front line of the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union, and kept the peace.